statesmen. It is a great pleasure to be part of this event to celebrate one of the academics who made the University of Ife, at least for my generation of undergraduates and postgraduates, an exciting place to study. After the bit that you have all heard about RS, I think it would be right if I start with the poetry of his name. And I want to say I'm about the only one among his several past students who could have such an effrontery to do so. But this is fitting because, lest we forget, his academic discipline is literature, that incomparable refractor of human encounters and definitions. RS's name, as you've all heard, is Ropo Sekoni. And the Oriki is very simple. The simplest form of it is about Jeteni Ibaro Jetobeniyo. Baba Funilo, Baba Funilasho, Baba Talode Funilomo, Sekoni. And that is more or less the real theme of the real idea of my lecture. It is not about anger, it is not the debate about the autonomy and creative capacities of cultural producers and their audiences, which are the core issues of cultural aesthetics, is rather premature in the Nigerian context. Cultural aesthetic discussion can only be meaningful where the institutional process for its promotion is firmly established as part of a program of citizenship rights. One of our difficulties in Nigeria at the moment is that that process exists only in the bridge. However, by cultural democracy, I mean a set of political arguments addressing inequalities and the continued undermining of citizenship in Nigeria. This includes challenging the current weaknesses or lack of democratic frameworks and the instruments for achieving social justice. The goal of cultural democracy then is to promote egalitarianism, by which I mean an equal society in which the good life, about which I hope to speak presently, thrives and is within the reach of every citizen. The creation of such a society requires both allocation and redistribution of resources, and in our own context, a new and different institutional arrangement. Professor Sekoni is one of those scholars who repeatedly brought diverse empirical observations and methodologies to the teaching of literature, and in effect, contribute to the shaping of the radical vision of society that came to underpin the study of that particular subject in that still great university of ours, that's Femi University. One can therefore say in retrospect that much of the energy of that radical scholarship was about creating the good life, both as a way of thinking and as worthy pursuit by all and sundry, but particularly by those of us who had that privilege of university education in a country such as ours. The good life is a theme that has occupied philosophers from the ancient to the present. It also continues to dominate a range of subjects in modern humanities and social sciences, either in the critique of the social and economic arrangements of most societies since 1945, or as recognition of the need for new economic models to redress the rapaciousness of consumer capitalism. The latter is especially relevant in view of the unfolding tragic consequences for humanity of the phenomenon of climate change and the ensuing environmental disasters. Indeed, environmental issues should be of concern to everyone in a country such as ours, given the dire conditions in the oil-producing states in the South and desertification in the North. So what is good life? The idea itself comes from classical philosophy and means simply a life that is worth living, which is also a life that is satisfying. Through socio-political and legal philosophy, we learn that for the good life to be possible, it must follow on the recognition of the greatest good. As it is, the greatest good then becomes the benchmark for acting, and any act which enables the realization of the greatest good is thus the right act. Any behavior which may be considered a deterrent to the realization of the greatest good is not only wrong, but should be regarded as an immoral act. There are a number of inferences to be drawn from this definition. One is that the acceptance of public good is an actual practice of the good life, and that one cannot exist without the other. A second inference is that the good life is secular. That is to say, it is not bound nor can be subjected to the rule or governing principles of religion, any religion. The third is that the good life is not about individual satisfaction or contentment, but rather the combination of the existence of all citizens. Within that existence, citizens regard and relate to one another in equal terms and proceed to organize the institutions that regulate their relationship within and between themselves and between them and the external world. The fourth and the final inference is that no individual can claim to have had a good life when his or her life fulfillment has no relation to the common good. That last inference may, of course, qualify as something to be decided on an individual ethical basis. Nonetheless, we cannot disregard the connection between the individual and society in the production of both good life and the public good. Good life, then, is the child of public good. From a well-developed sense of public good comes good life. One cannot stress this point too much. At this juncture, I would like to add to some of the things that have been said earlier in favor of our distinguished celebrator. He should indeed count himself lucky, more so that as a radical scholar, he has not had to suffer the fate of Socrates. And those who know philosophy, you know what happened to Socrates. He was given the hemlock to drink because he was corrupting young people by teaching them. He teaches us to drink wine. As a citizen, he has joined in many good causes. As you all heard from some of the things said about him earlier, not least by our distinguished chairman, he has been a successful and proud family man. And on that I have it true to say. On all counts, RS has done his best to achieve a good life. But what percentage of RS's countrymen and women born in the last 50 years and who have not stepped outside the country at all through their lives will be able to make this clear? The life expectancy in our country is now put variously at between 48 and 52, which is between 17 and 13 years shorter than the official retirement age. Life expectancy is not measured by the availability, let alone sophistication of medical facilities, though both may count towards the quality of general and specific care in a critical medical situation, and thus chances of medical survival. Life expectancy is measured as the randomness of life as may be achieved through the pursuit of the common good. As an example, a newborn who is underweight and receives no correctional care in the first few days, not weeks, of life is already sentenced to a life of poor health. stunted growth, and possible early death. However, the question goes beyond the child's poor width. It directly concerns the quality of the surrounding in which he or she had been conceived, and especially the form of public health education available to the hapless parents. Because the available data are unreliable, the rates of infant mortality in Nigeria remain practically unknown. This, of course, is in addition to the variations between the different parts of the country. I have heard the argument, misplaced and nauseating as it is, that infant mortality in Nigeria is likely a northern problem. I know too well, from my own experience and family connections, that it is equally happening in the presumed El Dorado, that is the Southwest, let alone the entire South. The simple fact is that given the advances in public health arrangements over the past 30 years, infant mortality and maternal death is a shame to us all, whenever and wherever it happens in our country. In education, Nigeria continues to have low enrollment and completion rates in both primary and secondary education relative to countries such as Ghana, South Africa, and the Republic of Korea. Most worryingly, in terms of actual investment and reward in education, the child in the public school system in Kenya, Botswana, South Africa, Namibia, Ghana, etc. has a return on investment benefit of between 75 and 85% to every dollar spent, compared to the Nigeria child, whose benefit stands at less than 25%. In all the indicators of human development, Nigeria's overall scores today are identical to those recorded in 1980. It is in conditions such as those often captured in statistical data that we see how democratic politics, without a priori commitment to public good, is meaningless. It was about 3 months ago that the federal government of Nigeria declared a state of emergency in the northeastern states of Adamawa, Yobe, and Borno. In spite of the military enforcement of the emergency to date and the subsequent proscription of Boko Haram, there is no guarantee that as I speak, those Nigerians who form themselves into Boko Haram are not plotting to kill you and me. This may sound morbid, but the evidence of indiscriminate and heartless killings by the alleged movement speaks for itself. As the British Guardian newspaper pointed out sometime this year, Boko Haram has made little secret of the fact that it regards itself not only at war with the Nigerian state and its security forces, but its people too. It has bombed churches, mosques, carried out assassinations, kidnapping, and mass assault. On a single day in January last year, it killed 185 people across Kano. As the years have gone by, the ferocity, ambition, and scale of its attack have increased, and only a few days ago, about 30 people were again killed by Boko Haram in Borno State. As a scholar with interest in social and cultural theories, I have very little pleasure in defending the current Nigerian constitution as a progressive document for nation building. That is because of its several inadequacies and defects as a federal constitution. It rewards rather than repudiates backward thinking. However, these defects should not be confused with an attack that has all the signs of locking fascism. As a Nigerian who is all too aware of the cultural mix that is our country, my view of the Boko Haram insurgency is that it is a premeditated attack against the Constitution of Nigeria, which is a grave issue. In spite of its many imperfections, the Constitution remains the document on which the existence of the Nigerian Federation and the Nigerian state is based. In other words, it is the source of Nigeria's sovereignty. What is intriguing and therefore makes the Boko Haram issue relevant to my discussion of good life is how the sex insurgency has been promoted in some public discourse as an alternative model of struggle for egalitarian principles in Nigeria. A German scholar, Theodor Adorno, points out somewhere that when God-fearing monotheists insist on the protection of their rights to practice their religion and to propagate it to therefore, when politicians and members of what the famous American sociologist C. Wright Mills called the power elite say that our country needs to be transformed, the question I ask as a Nigerian is how? Based on the reflections of other writers, I have pointed out that the NGOs and the currently fashionable discussions of development create a sense of a perpetual present which strengthens weak ideas. One of these ideas, for example, is the concept of the failed state that is frequently attached to Nigeria. As a concept, it is ahistorical, not least because it sets off misleading discussion in international relations. Even if most Nigerians subscribe to the phrase and regularly use it, it is doubtful that they are referring to the same thing as the development jet setters and NGOs. At best, Nigerians use the phrase failed state as an expression of indignation for the sort of life they have to live within their own country, and at worst, their complete disempowerment as citizens. The French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu had the good sense to distinguish between the right hand and the left hand of the state. This describes how the core functions of the state are delivered between the various arms. We could say that the right hand of the state is devoted to preserving the existing order. The left hand of the state attends to the social well-being and what we all know to be the good life. The left hand of the state includes education, health, social security, and the provision for cultural development of all kinds. Whether the left hand of the state exists in Nigeria in any meaningful form is debatable. As I have argued elsewhere, and this is in the book, this is because the story of the right hand of the state in Nigeria is particularly complicated. As in other countries, the right hand of the state is the military and the security apparatuses. However, in Nigeria, the development of these powers and how they are deployed have been fractured by the ethnicization of state formation, dating back to the alliances made between our colonial masters and feudal power. It is now understood that British colonialism treated the North and the South differently. It upheld feudal prestige and religious authority in the North, including toleration of slavery. Some of you may not be aware, but within the borders of present-day Nigeria lies the world's third largest slave society. This is the old Sokoto Caliphate, which was a slave society because slaves there were very important numerically as well as a focus of the polity's energies. In the South, British colonialism sought to reshape the old basis of traditional governance. This sometimes met with relative success, sometimes with appalling tragedy. This disparity could only lead to a misplaced sense of cultural superiority among the northern elite and a terrible foreboding about its relationship with the polities in the South. I should say this is an ideal point to press forward the historical button, not least because Mr. Sekoni's hospitality still has to be acknowledged. In 2009, former U.S. Ambassador to Nigeria, Princeton Lehman, attempted to call the country's elites to account for their failure to translate a national imagination into a political reality. In Lehman's view, the Nigerian nation-state was in danger of becoming irrelevant to U.S. energy interests, as oil and gas from countries such as Brazil and Angola could provide more stable sources of energy. As he worryingly put it, Nigeria's greatest strategic importance will be that it can fail. Playing oil-producing nations against one another may give some comfort to U.S. listeners, but the potential impact of a Nigerian collapse also poses the grave risk amply acknowledged by laymen. According to him, even more important than Nigeria's notorious corruption is the inability of its elite to articulate the national interest. However, I and others have argued that in Nigeria, the national interest is fractured by a struggle over the meaning of Nigerian sovereignty. Moreover, it is impossible to address these fault lines without discussing the paradoxical relationship between capitalism and feudalism. This is a matter consistently avoided by diplomats and NGOs who are dependent on the goodwill of ruling elites. One of the most problematic aspects of US leadership in world affairs is its own exceptional history in this respect. As two scholars, Hans Gerth and C. Wright Mills, noted in their analysis of master trends published in 1953, there was no feudal age in the United States, and therefore the economic ascendancy of the middle classes was largely uncompromised. It was not until the Great Depression, and then only quite briefly during the New Deal, that the American middle classes saw merit in class consciousness of any kind. Does this hold a lesson for Nigeria or Nigerians? My answer is yes. What Nigeria is experiencing at the moment, and perhaps for the future, is partly the enforcement of economic liberalism by power elite who have no alternative other than to participate in the destruction of political liberalism. There is nothing new in this story. In fact, it is the roots of fascism. We must understand that there is no umbilical cord that links economic liberalism and political liberalism. When it comes to the elongated development of economic liberalism in the countries of advanced capital, what Karl Polanyi calls the Great Transformation, we can see that the economic system was politically mediated by societies. In fact, this political that the world culture has been employed and abused by the conservative forces whilst they set about their task of dismantling and remaking Nigeria in their own image.